All right, let's head north today.
North Atlantic.
Yeah, way up north.
All right.
To the Faroe Islands.
Oh, I love the Faroes.
Oh, right. So we're going to dive into
Oh, yes.
the early history,
Love it.
the Faroe Islands.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at sources like
Oh,
Landnámabók,
Oh, the Landnámabók. Okay.
which is kind of like an
yeah.
ancient Icelandic saga,
Okay.
but with
yeah.
like a treasure map of history.
Okay.
So, but is it reliable? Like, how do we know we
Yeah.
can trust it? And who were the very first people to call
Right.
these islands home? So many questions.
The Landnámabók, or Book of Settlements,
Yeah.
is a really key source for this.
Okay.
But it's like a window into the Viking age
Uh-huh.
that we might need to clean a little bit.
Okay. I like that. What do you mean by that?
It was written
Yeah.
centuries after the events happened.
Oh, okay.
And so there are some potential biases we have to consider.
So we can't just take it as gospel truth.
Right, exactly.
So what kind of biases?
Well, for example,
Yeah.
it might emphasize,
Uh-huh.
certain lineages or land claims.
Mhm.
So it might be like a family history
Oh,
that was written to make one side look good.
okay. So kind of like
Yeah.
a little propaganda-ish.
A little, yeah, potentially, yeah.
Okay.
So that's why it's really important
Yeah.
to compare it with archaeological evidence
Mm-hmm.
and other historical texts
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
to get a more balanced view.
Yeah, like any good historical mystery.
Exactly.
Got to look at all the clues, right?
Yeah.
So what does it say about the very first settlers?
Well, it names a guy called Grimmer Kamben,
Grimmer Kamben.
yeah, as the first Norse settler.
Okay.
But even the date of his arrival is a bit hazy,
Oh, okay.
somewhere in the 9th century. But, this lack of precision is really typical
Yeah.
when we're working with these ancient sources.
Yeah, I can imagine. A little frustrating, but also kind of exciting, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like piecing together a puzzle.
Exactly. Love it.
So now there's this theory
Uh-huh.
about settlers who might have been there even before the Vikings.
Okay.
Tell me about these Irish monks.
Yes.
The Pipar?
The possibility of the Pipar
Yeah.
in the Faroes is really interesting.
Yeah.
The Icelandingabók, another Icelandic text,
Okay.
mentions them living in Iceland
Uh-huh.
before the Norse arrived.
Okay.
And there are also certain place names
Right?
with potential Gaelic roots,
Okay.
which hint at an earlier presence.
Wow. Okay, so Irish monks in the North Atlantic.
It's a cool image, huh?
Yeah, that's quite the image.
Yeah.
But how strong is the evidence for that?
Yeah.
Like, did they leave behind any monasteries or artifacts?
Well, that's where it gets a little tricky.
Okay.
There's no concrete archaeological proof as of yet.
Okay.
No ruins.
Uh-huh.
No distinctly Irish artifacts
Really?
have been unearthed.
Huh. So it's a cool theory.
Yeah.
But without the physical evidence, it's hard to say for sure.
Right,
So
yeah.
our listeners can ponder that one.
For sure.
Now, let's shift to the Vikings.
Okay.
The Landnámabók
Yeah.
might be a little fuzzy on the exact dates,
Uh-huh.
but they definitely left their mark on the Faroes, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So-
Right time.
Their arrival, when did that likely happen?
Likely happened during the late 9th century,
Okay.
a time when Vikings were exploring
Mm-hmm.
and expanding all over.
So?
Kind of the Viking Age boom,
Okay.
a period of just amazing energy and movement.
Yeah, I can just picture those
Yeah.
long ships cutting through the waves, and
Yes.
those explorers landing on these rugged shores.
Right, exactly.
So where did these Faroe-bound Vikings come from?
Well, primarily from Norway,
Okay.
but it's likely there were also influences
Mhm.
from those Norse communities already settled in places,
Okay.
like the Hebrides or Shetland. So
Yeah.
imagine
Yeah.
a mix of backgrounds, dialects,
Yeah.
experiences all coming together in this new land.
Okay, so it wasn't just one homogenous group,
Right.
more like a melting pot of Viking cultures.
Yeah, I like that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So when they landed,
Yeah.
did they just land wherever?
No, they were very strategic about it.
Oh, okay.
They chose spots along the coast,
Okay.
places with natural harbors,
Uh-huh.
good land for farming and livestock.
That's so...
Imagine them kind of eyeing those coastlines
Yeah.
and thinking, all right,
Yeah.
this is where we can build a life.
It makes sense, close to the sea,
Exactly.
for fishing and trade,
Uh-huh.
maybe even defense.
Yeah, for sure.
So that connection to the sea has obviously shaped Faroese culture.
Yes.
Even to this day.
Yeah.
So here's a question.
Okay.
How did they govern themselves
Yeah.
in those really early days?
So locally, they had these assemblies
Mm-hmm.
called ting
Okay.
for discussions and decisions. But what's remarkable is that they were also under the jurisdiction of a
Okay.
gulating.
Okay, now remind me what the gulating is again.
Yeah, so it was one of the most powerful regional assemblies
Okay.
back in Norway.
So the gulating reached all the way out to the Faroe Islands.
It did.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
How did that even work in practice?
So the gulating had immense authority.
Uh-huh.
It was like a combination of a Supreme Court
Okay.
and a legislative body.
Okay.
And its reach extended across the North Atlantic.
Wow.
It influenced everything from legal matters to trade.
Mm-hmm.
It was their way of connecting these far-flung communities
Yeah.
to a central system of governance.
So even way out in the Faroes,
Yeah.
you couldn't escape the long arm of the gulating.
That's right.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
What kind of impact did this have on the early Faroes?
Oh, so imagine this.
Yeah.
You're living in the Faroes,
Uh-huh.
and a dispute arises
Okay.
that your local ting can't resolve. You could then appeal to the gulating in Norway,
Wow.
bringing in their laws and precedents.
So,
This meant that the Faroes' legal system wasn't isolated.
uh-huh.
It was part of a larger framework
Okay.
that connected them to mainland Scandinavia.
So a blend of local governance
Yeah,
with ties to a powerful, distant authority,
right.
that must have created a very unique dynamic.
Yeah, for sure.
It makes you wonder how much autonomy the early Faroes really had.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It raises all sorts of questions about their relationship with Norway. Were they primarily independent, or
Yeah.
were they mostly following orders from afar?
Yeah.
It's a complex issue,
Yeah.
and it's one we'll continue to explore as we delve deeper into their history.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah.
We've been talking about these early Faroes settlers,
Yeah.
a mix of Viking cultures,
Right.
navigating life
Yeah.
under the watchful eye of the Galatina.
Yeah.
But there's another force that had a huge impact on their society, Christianity.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So how did that transform these Viking descendants?
It's a fascinating shift.
Yeah.
Imagine these islands, right?
Uh-huh.
Steeped in Norse traditions and mythology,
Yeah.
gradually embracing this new faith.
Yeah.
It wasn't a sudden overnight change,
Right.
more like a slow wave rolling in
Yeah.
over decades.
So no dramatic convert or die scenarios
Well,
like
yeah.
we see in some of the Viking sagas.
The sagas do tell of some resistance, yeah.
Okay.
They mention this powerful chieftain,
Okay.
Sigmundur Brestisen,
Okay.
sent by the Norwegian king,
Uh-huh.
Olaf Tryggvason,
Okay.
to convert the islands.
Okay.
So there were definitely clashes,
Yeah.
both physical and ideological,
Okay.
between those clinging to the old ways
Mm-hmm.
and those embracing Christianity.
Sounds like a pivotal moment.
It was, yeah.
What ultimately led to Christianity taking root?
Well, I think several factors were at play. So
Okay.
the backing of the Norwegian king gave it political weight, of course.
Right.
And the promise of this strong, centralized church
Uh-huh.
likely appealed to some who were seeking order and stability.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And plus, Christianity wasn't entirely foreign to the Vikings either.
Okay.
They'd encountered it through trade and raids for centuries.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, so it wasn't a complete shock to the system?
No, not at all.
But what were the lasting effects?
Yeah.
Did it just change their beliefs?
It went far beyond just changing beliefs.
Oh, okay.
Imagine, like, a whole new structure emerging.
Okay.
Churches are built,
Yeah.
bishops are appointed,
Right.
tithes are collected.
Okay.
The church becomes a landowner. Wow, power player.
Okay.
Sometimes even rivaling those powerful families we discussed earlier.
Ah, so those power dynamics got even more complex.
Exactly.
Did this new religious hierarchy create any friction?
I think it definitely shifted the balance.
Okay.
The church wielded considerable influence, not only in spiritual matters, but also in areas like education and healthcare.
So in a way, it filled a gap,
Potentially.
providing services that might have been lacking before.
Possibly, yeah.
Interesting.
And, it's important to remember, in those days, the church wasn't just a place of worship.
Right.
It was
Yeah.
a center of learning and social support.
Right.
Yeah.
So did this increase the Faroes' connection to Norway?
It's interesting, while the church in the Faroes was tied to the Norwegian archdiocese,
Uh-huh.
it also developed its own distinct character,
Okay.
shaped by the unique conditions of island life.
Yeah.
So it kind of mirrors what we see with their political structures.
Okay. Yeah.
A blend of external influence
Right.
and internal development.
Yeah, so it highlights how even with these outside forces at play,
Yeah,
the pharaohs were still forging their own path.
right.
But power vacuums rarely stay empty for long.
That's right.
You mentioned those powerful families vying for control.
Yeah.
How did they adapt to this new landscape?
Think of it as a game, right? With new players and new rules.
Okay.
Some families align themselves with the church,
Okay.
gaining influence through religious connections.
Uh-huh.
Others might have resisted, clinging to older power structures.
Right.
It was a time of shifting alliances.
Okay.
And as always, I'm sure some of those power struggles weren't exactly peaceful.
Right. Okay, so not all kumbaya and hymn singing then.
Probably not. No.
I imagine these power plays had a real impact
Oh, absolutely.
on the everyday lives of the Faroese people.
Yeah, imagine you're a farmer or fisherman in the Faroes.
Uh-huh.
A dispute erupts over fishing rights.
Right.
And now the church gets involved,
Okay.
wielding its legal and moral authority.
Yeah.
Or perhaps a powerful family, aligned with the church, gains control of vital trade routes,
Right.
impacting everyone's livelihood.
Yeah.
These power struggles weren't just abstract games.
Yeah.
They had tangible consequences.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that history isn't just about
Exactly.
kings and bishops.
Uh-huh.
It's about how those events ripple through society,
For sure.
shaping the lives of everyday people.
Exactly. And in the Faroes, these power dynamics
Yeah.
played out against a backdrop of ongoing ties to Norway.
Right.
They were still under Norwegian rule,
Right.
navigating those complexities alongside their own internal developments.
So we've got this multifaceted society here.
Yeah.
Norse heritage,
Uh-huh.
Christian influence,
Yeah.
powerful families,
Right.
and the Norwegian crown all in the mix.
All in the mix, yeah.
What happens next in this evolving story?
Well, as we move further along, we see the Norwegian monarchy tightening its grip.
Okay.
The Faroes experience both the benefits and drawbacks of closer integration with Norway,
Okay.
and their economic life undergoes some interesting transformations.
Intriguing. Sounds like we're heading into a period of both challenges and opportunities for the Faroes.
That's right.
I can't wait to explore all of that in the final part of our deep dive. Okay, so we've seen the Vikings arrive in the Faroes,
Yeah.
the coming of Christianity,
Right.
the rise of these powerful families.
Why?
It's been really fascinating to see how this society kind of evolved.
Yeah.
But history keeps going, right?
Oh, it never stops.
So what happens next?
Well, as we move into the 12th and 13th centuries,
Okay.
we start to see the Norwegian monarchy
Mm-hmm.
really consolidating their power.
So those tensions that we talked about
Yeah.
between those local families and the Gulating.
Uh-huh.
So the Norwegian crown kind of steps in and says, all right.
Yeah, they're trying to bring these outlying territories under tighter control.
So those powerful families, did they just step aside and let
Yeah.
the king take over?
You're right to imagine some pushback.
Yeah.
There were definitely some power struggles and resistance,
Okay.
but ultimately the Norwegian king held the upper hand.
Right.
He had resources, a standing army, the backing of the church.
So like a king with that kind of clout, what did this mean
Yeah.
for the people living in the Faroes? Like, did they...
Well, one way was through appointed officials.
Right.
So think of them like royal governors,
Okay.
sent to oversee the islands.
Okay.
They would collect taxes, enforce laws.
So even though they were hundreds of miles away,
Yeah,
they still had to deal with the tax man.
that's right. And they made sure the king's interests were represented.
Besides the taxes, how did it affect their legal system?
Yeah.
Did the Gulating still have a say?
It did. The Gulating continued to play a role,
Okay.
further integrating the Faroes into the Norwegian legal framework.
Okay.
So imagine a legal dispute in the Faroes
Uh-huh.
that couldn't be settled locally,
Okay.
could be appealed all the way to the Gulating in Norway.
It's kind of like a higher court,
Yeah, exactly.
keeping those legal ties strong. So it's
Yeah.
like a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
The protection and resources of the kingdom, but also less freedom to make their own decisions.
Right. So what were the reactions to this closer relationship?
Yeah, what did the people think about it?
Well, you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
There were both advantages and disadvantages.
Okay.
For the Faroes, so on the one hand, being part of Norway offered stability.
Right.
They had access to larger markets, trade routes, even military support.
Kind of like safety in numbers.
Yeah.
Okay, but what about the downside?
Yeah.
Was there resentment towards this loss of autonomy?
Well, it's important to remember that autonomy might have looked different back then.
Okay.
While some might have resented the king's interference,
Yeah.
others might have welcomed the stability and order that he brought.
Oh, okay.
And remember, the pharaohs retained some local control through their fitting assemblies.
So it was a balancing act
Yeah.
between the local customs and the demands of the Norwegian crown.
Oh.
We've talked a lot about politics and power,
Yes.
but what about the economy?
Right.
So we know trade was vital during the Viking Age. Did that continue to thrive under Norwegian rule?
It actually became even more important.
Yeah.
Remember how the Vikings strategically settled near the coasts?
Uh-huh.
That paid off big time. The pharaohs developed a booming fishing industry.
Wow.
They were exporting dried fish to Norway and mainland Europe.
So those longships were still plying the waves, but instead of Viking raiders
Yeah.
bringing dried cod
Yeah.
to hungry customers.
Yeah, that's right.
Did this newfound wealth change Faroe's society?
Absolutely. So this economic boom brought prosperity, but also new challenges.
Okay.
Managing resources, dealing with competition,
Uh-huh.
navigating trade regulations,
Okay.
all became major issues.
So economic success always comes with its own set of complexities.
That's right.
How did this economic activity affect their relationship with Norway?
It's interesting. This economic relationship
Yeah.
actually strengthened their ties to Norway.
Okay.
They relied on Norwegian markets for their exports,
Okay.
and Norway relied on the Faroes for a steady supply of fish.
So it's a two-way street.
Yeah, it created this kind of symbiotic relationship.
So amidst all these external forces,
Yeah.
the gulating, the church,
Yeah.
the Norwegian king, the demands of trade,
Right.
did they manage to maintain their own distinct culture?
That's what makes the Faroe Islands so fascinating.
Yeah.
Despite all these influences, they did develop a unique identity,
Okay.
rooted in their Norse heritage, shaped by that island environment,
Uh-huh.
and further molded by those interactions with the wider world
Okay.
through trade and religion.
So a true melting pot, but one that forged its own unique character.
Exactly.
What a journey this has been
Yeah.
through early Faroe's history.
Right.
We've seen them navigate those complex relationships with powerful forces,
Yeah.
adapt to new beliefs,
Uh-huh.
forge a really distinct cultural identity.
And it's just the beginning.
Right.
You know, the Faroe Islands have continued to evolve,
Yeah.
facing new challenges, embracing new opportunities.
Right.
Their story is far from over.
Well, it leaves me wanting to learn more.
Good.
And for our listeners, we encourage you to keep digging, keep questioning, and keep exploring.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
There's a whole world of history out there just waiting to be discovered.
And that's why we do what we do.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Faroe Islands.
Always a pleasure.